back at WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We are positively into March. It means I'm back on the air. I'm tanned and well rested and losing my voice from singing Springsteen songs on the road. But we are taking the Maryland Crab Cake Tour back out on the road. It's all brought to you by our friends at the Maryland Lottery. I got these fresh. They look so old school, kind of like me when I don't shave. Instant lottery scratch offs. We're going to be giving these away on the Maryland Crab Cake Tour. We were set up for Fadley's this week. We had a little complication there. We're going to be getting back down to Fadley's a little later in the month. I am putting together a roster of crab cakes, crab soup, crab things, oyster things, food things, beer things in April and May. It's all brought to you by our friends at the Maryland Lottery in conjunction with our friends at Window Nation. Sometimes I wear the bucket hat. 866-90Nation is the way to get them. You buy two, you get two free, and it's 24 months now, 0% financing with our friends at Window Nation. Do what I did back in August. And when you hit them, they can bring the windows, fix it all, but they can't keep the spiders and the damn ants out this time of year. So I'm working on that. That's another problem altogether. I missed Radio Row this year at Super Bowl. The Baltimore Ravens sent an email to the NFL and said, don't come anymore, 27 years. It's a long story. There will be a different and loud ending in all of that. But whenever I've gotten together with Chris Nowinski, former professional wrestler up in Harvard, and talking about players and brain injuries and head injuries, they always say March is the awareness month, and I've got a local person here, and I want to thank Karen Sagal for bringing Bryan Pugh on. He's the executive director of the Brain Injury Association of Maryland. I've had a few occasions in real life with issues, and we all hear CTE, and the concussion movie. And Bryan, I know you won't find this hard to believe in the National Football League, but they didn't like mouthy sports radio guys like me over 3 decades talking on Radio Row about guys who had brain injuries in the National Football League. It's that thing they don't want to talk about that movies were made about. And but certainly in your world and where you are, it's not just a football thing. The more I've talked to people about this, car accidents and concussions and sports and concussions and heading soccer balls and concussions and just how important our brains are. And I have a friend struggling right now, childhood friend struggling with some issues. And I just want to welcome you on and tell you your work's important and educate me today. Tell me where we are in 2023 here as we have a month where I know you want to shine some light on all of the issues of brain injuries here.
Well, absolutely. And thanks so very much for having me on, Nestor. This is a great opportunity for us to share. It is, in fact, Brain Injury Awareness Month for the entire month of March. We are trying to not only raise awareness around sports concussions, because there's been so many stories lately, particularly with the Tua Tagovailoa and even the DeMar Hamlin story has some brain injury implications as well there. But we're also trying to acknowledge that there are some additional brain injuries that are going on right now that people really aren't putting together. And even though COVID-19 kind of wiped the board of all other public health concerns, the opioid overdose crisis is still impacting and creating new brain injuries every day. And that's one of the things that we want to make that connection, because the opioid overdose, what it's really doing is it's removing the oxygen from the brain. The reason you pass out and have an overdose is that you're no longer getting sufficient oxygen to your brain, and creating what's either an anoxic, which means no oxygen, or hypoxic, meaning not enough oxygen going to the brain. And now with these new hyper drugs with fentanyl and being combined with a variety of different things, these opioid overdoses are more critical and are taking longer and longer to recover from. And
that's not what I expected to hear from you, by the way, right? So, like, as I'm sitting here right now, I've been doing this 31 years. Not that I've heard the speech before or not, but nobody had ever heard of fentanyl 5 years ago, right?
Well, exactly.
And then what's the long term? So, okay, you took fentanyl, you didn't die. What happened?
Well, and so what happens is, depending on how long you've been out, how long it took you to, if you had the naproxen or the naloxone that was able to bring you back. Let's say you were out for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes. We've had people down as long as 20, 25 minutes. That's like being on the bottom of a pool for 25 minutes. And so they bring you up, and, so not only do you have the substance abuse disorder, but then you've also got this brain injury. And so, we are familiar with treating people with substance abuse disorders. You get them sponsors, you get them into meetings, maybe you get them some additional drugs, but they don't have the knowledge about the brain injury piece too. And then some of the things that actually happen to try and treat the substance abuse disorder can adversely affect people with brain injuries. And so it's a huge issue. It's a huge thing that people aren't recognizing. It's a two-part problem. They're sort of facing the issue of the overdose, but they're not really recognizing the brain injury component.
My audience is always used to me talking about sports and, my sports stuff and Raven stuff, obviously with Lamar Jackson right now performs and people read about it and hear about it. And I think there's a, and
Yep,
I
exactly.
saw concussion 10 years ago. Well, what time's the game on? Can I bet
Right.
on it?
Exactly.
The DeMar Hamlin thing,
Uh-huh.
it felt different for 5 minutes, kind of like politics and anything else in the news cycle and whatever. I mean, we had an insurrection here that seemed to kind of come and gone, and the guy started still not in prison. So,
Right.
things come and go. You know what I mean? The DeMar Hamlin thing, man, when we were in that day or two, and I'm watching the combine, and his teammates, Jordan Poyer's trying to get hired. My wife and I are out having a taco at Nacho Mama's the other night, and I see the 3, and they got the 3 out, and everybody's
Exactly.
concerned about the players, and it felt so gladiatorial, and they stopped the game and sent everybody home, and we all prayed, and we all all of that.
Yeah.
Wait. Before we did the show, I'm going to out you right now, Bryan Pugh. You football fan. You were asking me about Lamar and all that.
Sure.
Dude, you're in the brain injury business, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you know what I mean? I'm in the sports business, and I remember when Howard Cosell just got tired of guys beating each other senseless in boxing matches.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that way about MMA. When I watch MMA, I can't watch it.
I
And I've
know.
had some conversations with people saying that's disturbing to me. That's someone's child. That's just not. That's not going to have a good ending. I always feel that way when I watch these gladiatorial things. Where
Mm-hmm.
are you on football, Mr. Brain Injury Guy? I mean, you love football, and I think it makes us all a little, Bob Costas.
Yeah,
We all talk
so I
about
got to
it.
tell you, I was a dyed-in-the-wool football fan growing up. We were season ticket holders of the Florida State Seminoles for over a decade when we lived down in Florida. We came up here. We made friends with Coach Harbaugh. Our daughters played softball together, so we were in and around it up here. We recognized it. We knew that it was a huge uplift for the city when they were able to bring back a team after losing the Colts.
I am the result of this. I have a career, literally.
And
I mean,
well, exactly,
yeah.
and it's a huge opportunity for the city, and it's a great point of pride. But the reality is, I've really had a change of heart on it in many ways, and it's been really difficult. I will tell you, it's much easier for me to be able to be against MMA, to be against boxing, because that sport is designed to give someone a brain injury. I win when I give you a brain injury, when I knock you out. And people are, touted on those, 35-0 knockouts, and that means that I gave 35 concussions. So that's easier. Football, I think, is a little bit more challenging, particularly because there is, there's strategy, and there's grace, and there's beauty, and there's athleticism that's wrapped up in all of that.
There's also violence. It sort of leads,
but it's a violent sport,
yeah.
and you get down and you start looking at the CTE encephalopathy center up in Boston. They've looked at, I believe, 385 brains, and 365 of those have had CTE.
I've had Chris on the show many times.
Yeah,
Chris is in my phone.
And so the numbers is like 90% of the brains that they're looking at that have been donated to them from sports figures. And we just had Irv Cross, one of my heroes growing up, one of the first Black sports newscasters, on with Phyllis George and Brent Musburger in CBS Sports. That was a huge thing. He was a Philadelphia Eagle, and even though he died of a heart attack, when they did it, he had stage 4 CTE.
He sat in my studio for 3 hours one day, and I literally touched the tape. It's crazy you would say his name. He was obviously, I mean, I'm 54, right? So I grew up with Jimmy Reed. Give me the intangibles, Bryan. Give me the intangibles in the game. So I had Irv Cross sat in my studio down at the Lord Baltimore Hotel when I was on WLG. He was an investor in the CFL. Yeah. So when the CFL came and the Stallions, he was a part of trying to be a part of that league. Mm-hmm. And he sat in my studio, and I found the old tape, and I thought, if I transcribe, if I get that and put that out as greatest hits, would people want to listen to Irv Cross? And I'm thinking, I better get that done. Now that you've mentioned it, you
He's
just said, I
huge.
didn't realize that he was diagnosed with
Yeah,
CTE. And
stage
that makes
4.
all
It's
the
like
sense in the
the
world. Any of
worst
these guys
level.
dying.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
so and now, the counter argument is, that the only people that think they have CTE are sending their brains to the institute. But time and time and time and time and time and time again. And then we continue to see things like with Tua. That was awful. And that was after all of the stuff that we had talked about, concussion. That's after the movie. That's after all the players fund was created to try and, you know what I mean? And
They send
so
these guys back in the game, and it feels like
4 days later, I mean, we all saw it happen in the Bills game. We saw what happened in the Bills game. And then 4 days later, they turn around and send him back in against the Bengals. And then now we're standing over him. And yeah, I think, I'm getting, like I said, we were, my family loved football, and we grew up playing football and loving football, but it's really kind of turned the tide. And certainly since I've been executive director for the last 12 years, it's really I really am conflicted about it. I really am conflicted about it because I don't appreciate, us subjecting, these wonderful athletes, to this punishing without any changes.
Well, I'm
And
22 years out on writing Purple Rain 1, and the Ravens winning the first Super Bowl here.
mhm,
And, Coach Billick's been my partner for a long time here. And, players associated with that era are my age. They just
mhm,
are. Matt Stover, I mean, some younger than me. Kyle Richardson and Mike Flynn are a little younger than me, a couple of guys. But in that era, guys that are friends of mine, Dwayne Starks, I saw a couple weeks ago. And, I mean, we lost Goose, right? Recently.
mhm,
And so, I mean, of that era, there's a player I know of that era who's got problems.
mhm,
And it's so disturbing to me because this is one of my guys. You know what I mean? Like, I remember good times, memories, the barn, things that were said, nights that went out. It's almost 30 years later, 27 years since they came to town.
mhm.
But it's different when it's humanized in that way. And I've been sitting at Radio Row for 27 years where doctors have come up, Nowinski bringing people by, trying to save lives, drug addicts, all the things that you would see in the NFL,
Yep.
wives, Sylvia Mackey, right? I mean, Sylvia's been on my show many, many times.
Mhm.
John was on my show when he was of the right mind many, many years ago.
Yep.
So, and I saw him lose his mind. I was at a block event where he got behind the drum kit and started banging on drums, and he's so big and so strong. And I felt for his wife. I thought, my God, like every day. And this is football. And I sit here, I've glorified it for a long, long time. We all do. We love
Absolutely.
football. We love
Absolutely.
football. But this is real, and you see it come to your desk in a non-football parlance for this month.
Mhm.
What should people know about brain injury? And I know you have the Maryland Brain Injury Trust Fund as well. What's an activation point for people that don't have a friend who played football or where they are? They're just out there listening and they want to be helpful in some way.
Well, so, what's really interesting is, what we have found repeatedly, and you even mentioned it, everybody knows somebody who's had a brain injury, or somebody who's had a stroke, or somebody who's had brain cancer, or somebody who's had an operation,
And what that does to them,
and the changes you see that happen, you see what occurs, and it's heartbreaking. What we find is it's incredibly challenging for the family members. But for us, brain injury is a community injury because I can no longer be the cantor at my temple. I can no longer do my Boy Scout trips. I can no longer, coach my daughter's basketball team because I just don't have the capacity.
Instant
So
quality of life change. Instant.
it is it's a trajectory change for the community, and that's why we think it's so important to talk about it. Estimates are as high as 605,000 families in Maryland living with somebody who has had a brain injury, and we talk about acquired brain injury, and that's sort of the cumulative types, where we've got, it's the umbrella of brain injury, because we have traumatic brain injury, which is your concussions and your mild traumatic brain injuries, which we've talked about in sports. But the acquired brain injury is when you talk about strokes, when you talk about aneurysms, when you talk about those variety of things. So everybody knows somebody, and is very likely related to somebody who's had a brain injury in some capacity. So when you're looking to outreach, there's a variety of things you can do. You can start at our website, biamd.org. We've got lots of resources and information for people who have questions. We started 40 years ago. We were started by families who had kids with brain injuries who really didn't have anywhere to turn in 1983, so they turned to themselves. They created an 800 number. We've been answering that phone number for 40 years. It's 800-221-6443. And we get around 300 phone calls a month talking to people that are just reaching out looking for help. One of the other things that you can do right now that we're trying to raise awareness around is the Brain Injury Trust Fund for individuals that have either exhausted their insurances or unable to get the things that they need, particularly case management, which is coordinating care to try and, because if your brain's not working and your family's trying to, keep bread on the table and keep the job so they can keep insurance, it's really hard to keep up with all of the different things that are required. And so case management is a primary tool. And so the Brain Injury Trust Fund was created several years ago to try and provide resources for individuals that have exhausted their insurance or are incapable of getting those kinds of services. And right now we're aiming for $500,000 to be able to start using that money to help individuals. And we've partnered with the Department of Health has partnered with the Department of Transportation, and that when you do your vehicle registration, you have an opportunity when you check out to donate. And we've been really, really lucky, and we've got thousands of people have donated. When we initially did it, it was a $1 donation, but now we've upped it to any amount that you can. And so now the average donation is about $11. And so we're fast approaching halfway point of our 500,000 to be able to start helping people. So if you're renewing your vehicle registration, it's really easy to do. It's one of the boxes you can check, add a couple of bucks, and every dollar helps.
He is Bryan Pugh. He is the executive director of the Brain Injury Association of Maryland. You can find them out at BIAMD.org. I'll be throwing a link out on our Twitter as well. This year, celebrating the 40th anniversary, serving Maryland families confronting the challenges of acquired brain injuries. We talk so much about football and all this. So I caught this in the conversation because I listen when I have guests on. Tallahassee, what's the best oyster you've ever eaten? I need to know.
Best oyster I've ever eaten.
Well, I'm going to do an oyster tour this summer. So I'm trying, I've done the crab cake thing a couple of years. I'm going to continue to do the crab cake tour. But in August, it's my 25th anniversary. I know you guys are doing 40 there. Okay. So I'm going to go out and eat some oysters. So
here's the challenge, okay?
A guy that's been there, Apalachicola, had to have
Apalachicola, right? Down to yeah, Apalachicola is the best, but you don't eat oysters with a month that doesn't have an R in it.
That's urban legend. I'm telling you.
Hey, but if it works anyway. That's so we wouldn't we wouldn't eat oysters in August. We'd wait for an R in the month. But anyway, yeah, Apalachicola Bay is the best oysters you can get. Actually, catfish and shrimp are fantastic in Tallahassee. That's really where you want to go, and go down to I'm trying to think. Well, we did Catfish Pad is where we used to go when we were in Tallahassee. Catfish Pad.
I've been down there twice. Beautiful part of the world. My buddy Peter Boulware, I mentioned the Super Bowl champions. He's got his Toyota dealerships down there killing it. He's on Facebook all the time. His kids are killing it in sports. So there's a little Florida State thing. We had prime time here for a couple minutes too.
We did briefly. It seems like he's got a jersey for everybody, but making his short tours.
But only one college. Well, until he stared coaching college, right?
Right, exactly. Now Colorado's kind of grabbing the glory, but it was already Florida State way back when he was, and when he was with the Falcons and the Braves, back and forth between World Series and football games. So
Bryan, I had Prime on the show over in Parkville at Putty Hill Station.
Really?
He came out on a Tuesday. Oh yeah, fur coat. He came out with Cordell Stewart, who I'm still friends with. All the audio was up. He did 45 minutes of air with me and answer questions from the crowd. Prime. Just call me Prime. Call me Prime. So he also did Radio Row. So Prime was on the air with me last month. But I'll just say this about Florida State. I went to a football game there. I went down twice. I was there. I went in and out for a Senior Bowl and drove over to Pensacola and over to Mobile. I went that way. I was down in Panama City with a girlfriend back in the day and did the spring break thing. That's when I was a spring break guy.
Wow.
I went to one game in Tallahassee. It's back when Maryland was in the ACC, right? We would go,
yeah, sure,
sacrificial.
Right, everybody needed a W in the ACC, so they played Maryland, right?
So here we come. We're going down, and this is when the Ravens were playing in Jacksonville. 98, 99. I think 99 was the year we went down. It was a back-to-back. So like
That was a good year. 99
good
was a good year of Florida State football.
good weekend, right? So it
Hmm.
was Saturday. We're going to go over to Tallahassee. We're going to see Maryland play Florida State, get killed. We knew that. I think the final, they didn't give up 60, but they probably gave up 48. It was like 48-14 or something like that, right?
Right.
And there's a Lamont Jordan era, I think, for the Terps. I think he broke one, ran away from somebody because he had that kind of talent.
Hmm.
And then the next day we went over to Jacksonville. So all I remember is showing up there. The Terps are a 24-point underdog, and they weren't going to cover. And the horse comes out, and old Bobby Bowden's there, and man, the horse and the stat and and I was like, woo! No wonder nobody comes down here and wins.
Oh yeah, it was an amazing, and it's part of the spectacle. And again, it's part of the spectacle of football. We just as you had Ray Lewis out there with the big explosions and walking in his dance, the Chief Osceola and Renegade throwing the flaming spear down. It's a real huge thing. So yeah, it's a big deal. And we're still kind of, I think, disgruntled about Kansas City stealing the tomahawk chop, but that's to be
I don't know
debated.
whether Ted Turner and Jane. I don't know who. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know how that got over there.
Correct or incorrect wherever it is. So
right.
I'll tell Mr. Snyder that as well down the road. But hey, I want to promote what you're doing here, the Brain Injury Awareness Month, right?
Mhm.
So last talking point for you, just off of that, how long's Brain Injury Month been going on? And just during the course of the month, just keeping awareness and having it be maybe think of somebody that's had this happen in their life and maybe ways you can be helpful.
Absolutely. And so, again, you can reach out to us either at our phone number or our website if there's somebody that's looking, if somebody who's going through some challenging times. One of the things that we also want to recognize is, COVID has created new brain injuries as well. So people are talking about brain fog and the long haulers. And so if you know somebody who's really having a rough time, getting back into things. Somebody's coming off of a bad car accident or a motorcycle accident, and they're really struggling. Those are the kind of folks that we want to make sure that they know that they're not alone, because it's very isolating. Because you may lose your job, you may lose your friends, you may lose access to work, and it starts, and you stop doing the social things that you can do. And so reach out to us. We have a variety of different opportunities for caregivers, support groups. We have individuals with brain injury support groups. We've got mentor support groups. And so there's a lot of opportunity. So you're not alone, and we do have people that can talk to you in whatever capacity, whether it was last week, whether it was 10 years ago, whether it was 25 years ago. As you're wrestling with these issues, we certainly have all kinds of resources available. So that's really our main message: is you're not alone. And then our big event is our conference, the 22nd, 23rd, and 24th in Pikesville. It's one of the largest brain injury conferences. We have over, I think, 40 speakers
Wow.
over the course of 3 days. And we have something for everybody. We try to program individuals that can speak to people with brain injuries. We caregivers, healthcare providers. We offer continuing education units for healthcare providers. And over the course of the 3 days, we've got some really great speakers. And so I would encourage, take a look at our website, and if it's something you're interested in, it's a great opportunity to learn more about brain injury from people all over the country.
I can't have any progress without any focus on it, right? So bringing people together, and you ask, are things getting better, or treatment's getting? I'm sure they are, But the best thing is don't have one and support the people that do. So I guess that's
right. If your sport has a helmet, please wear it. That's our creed. It's like if your sport has a helmet, wear it, because you only get one brain. And it can happen anytime, anywhere, to anyone. It's not socioeconomic status. It's not race, creed, color, sex, national origin, or preference. It's anybody.
It can be slipping on ice next weekend.
Absolutely. And we have
Absolutely.
plenty of those.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, great chat. Had some fun, had some oysters, had a little football on the dark side of football, which I think we all have seen. And I want to give a shout out to my wife, because you mentioned long haul and COVID. My wife's had leukemia twice, and a battle for her life, and just an awful way that I don't even want to. We don't think about too much. It's been 8 years now.
God bless.
Since second battle. But the chemo brain. You know what I mean? The things.
Absolutely, that's a very real thing. Absolutely,
very real thing.
And you combine that with the leukemia and the inability. I mean, it's about blood problems, not being able to get oxygen to the right places, and the greediest oxygen organ is the brain. And so if if you're not getting sufficient oxygen, you're having blood issues, there is trouble. And chemo brain and those kinds of issues are absolutely an issue.
All right. Well, you can reach out at BIAMD.org. He is Bryan Pugh. He's the executive director of the Brain Injury Association of Maryland. I say that 3 times. Brain Injury Association of Maryland. That's where you get the BIAM. Ha! That's a mouthful.
Yeah, well, we were BIAM, but we had Mississippi and Michigan fight us for it, so we just went ahead and tacked on the D. So
there you go. Put the D on there. All right. Fair enough. D and .org. You can find them. It is Brain Injury Awareness Month here in March, and I'm delighted to have Bryan aboard. Big appreciation to Karen for setting it up as well. I'm setting up the Maryland Crab Cake Tour. They have these incredible $5 million scratch offs, and these things are $50. And I literally was at a Drug City the other day with George Fotis. Like, who would buy the $50 scratch offs if they can't keep them in? So these are also going on, and also the $2 old school instant lottery scratch offs. It is the 50th anniversary. We're doing the Maryland Crab Cake Tour. We're going to have some new dates. I had to move the Fadley's event this week. Also, our friends at Window Nation, 866-90 Nation. If you want to replace your windows, it's time. I had mine done last August. I tell you what, bills in the winter, heating and all that. Now that it's spring, somebody come and get the spiders and the ants out of my windows, and we'll have all that done. But Window Nation, you buy 2, you get 2 free, and 24 months 0% financing. 866-90 Nation and our friends at Window Nation. I look a little funny in the floppy hats. I'm not going to wear that. It's a serious conversation we're having here. I am Nestor. We are WNST AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. Yes, we talk more than just Lamar Jackson around here. That makes us cool. We're BaltimorePositive.com. Stay with us.